So we're now at the part of the moving forward series episode. We're going to talk about teams that got eliminated in the conference final. And the good thing about this, alongside with MLS Cup, is that there's only two teams that we're going to talk about during this segment. We're going to first talk about RSL, who got eliminated in the Western Conference final. And then in the next episode, I will be talking about the Philadelphia Union and them eliminating in the Eastern Conference final before I talk about the loser of MLS Cup, that is the Portland Timbers, and the winner of MLS Cup and the champions of this season, that is NYCFC. But going back to talk about RSL in this moving forward series, I mean, to say that RSL had probably had the craziest season out of anybody in MLS is kind of an understatement. I mean, this is just an incredible, insane, and chaotic year, especially as they were getting close to playoff time and what happened in the playoffs, because I'm pretty sure this is probably the best Cinderella story we have seen in the MLS postseason since when the Colorado Rapids made that MLS Cup run in 2010. And I will say that, that run that the Rapids had is still going to take the cake over this one because, RSL didn't really get themselves all the way to MLS Cup and winning the whole competition despite being the lowest seed in the Western Conference. But still, over the year, there is not a lot of low seed team, and incredibly, the last team into the playoffs of your respective conference could make such a deep run like what RSL has had in some of the games that they had in the playoffs. I mean, just by some of the most memorable and most chaotic game we've seen in the playoffs this season, and also just to continue to show why this team have just kind of show a lot of resilience for them to make this Cinderella run. But overall, they finished with a record of 14-6-14 and finished with 48 points. They scored 55 goals this season, which was among one of the most in the league. But the problem is they gave up 54 goals, which was among the league's worst defensive team, and they actually had the worst defensive stat out of any team that made it to the playoffs in the Western Conference, and they had a goal differential of +1. Like I said, they were the last team in the Western Conference by finishing 7th place and getting that big victory against Sporting KC. And again, I know some people are still going to immediately bring up what happened prior to that goal that Krylak scored that pretty much just saved RSL season and is the reason why they're in the playoffs. But let's just not remember of how amazing that goal was, and how, again, this just a character of RSL this season just numerous times have shown a lot of resiliency and scoring some late goals to not only sometimes rescue themselves to get a point, but also getting a goal to win the game to get them into the stage that they were into the playoffs on the final day of the season. And as I mentioned, even though they had that incredible Cinderella run, like the old saying, all Cinderella story eventually is going to struck midnight, and it did struck midnight in the conference final against the Portland Timbers. Top goal scorer for this RSL team, you got Damir Krylak with 16 goals, followed by Albert Rusnak, who we know he's no longer an RSL player after joining the Seattle Sounders just a couple of days ago on a DP contract. He finished with 11 goals in his final season with RSL, followed by Anderson Julio with 8 goals. Rubio Rubin, a guy that I don't think anybody have heard of in the beginning of the season, and I think you can even say the same about Anderson Julio too. Like, these are two guys that you did not expect to be guys that is going to be right up there in terms of the top goal scorer chart for this RSL team. But they were. I mean, they definitely produced a goal, and especially Rubin was a guy that I think in the beginning of the season when he was just on a red-hot form, and that really kind of capitalized after he scored what turns out to be the goal of the year winner of this season with his bicycle kick against the San Jose Earthquakes. Just to show you how, every season we always tends to have a player that just kind of came out of nowhere, and a guy that you probably not heard in the preseason, but you definitely will know his name by the time either the middle of the season happened or the end of the season will go, because of the incredible year that he has. So yeah, what a year Rubin and Julio of course had this year, and then followed by Michael Chan, who I forgot to actually put how many goals that he scored. He actually only ends up to be 3 goals that he scored this season, which just shows you how RSL, most of the goals came from these front 3, or at least in this case these 4 players, where I think if I do the math correctly, I believe 43 of the 55 goals all came from these 4 players that ends up in the top 5 goal scored. Now, the top assist leader, Aaron Herrera, who has really got a lot of interest in Europe. I'm kind of surprised that RSL hasn't thought about maybe selling him off to Europe, considering there's so many interests of him this offseason. He finished with 11 assists, time with Albert Rusnak with 11 assists. Then you got Damir Krylak, him so close in terms of becoming only the third MLS players this season to register double-digit goal and double-digit assist leader, and also become the only MLS team to have two different player two, with Rusnak, of course, doing the same thing, and then Krylak could have done so if he would have just registered one more assist. But he finished with 9 assists, followed by Johnny Menendez with 5 assists, and just Miram with 5 assists to round up the top 5 for RSL. So what went right for this RSL team? I mean, again, no doubt the Cinderella run in the playoffs was one of the things that I think it's going to be remembered for a very, very long time. And Krylak and Rusnak had a big bounce back year this season. So coming into this season, you know, my big question with this RSL team, besides the fact that how are they going to work with the way that they were very limited in terms of their signing, because they didn't have an owner, and that a lot of the transaction that and the signings that they did last year was under the league's control. And that also kind of means that they need to, of course, have some of those big time players that they have to perform. And you know, the two big time players that I know this RSL team has is Damir Krylak and Albert Rusnak. And after just such a tough 2020 season, both of those guys had what a big bounce back year that they had, and once again proven the two pivotal player of this RSL team, which is also kind of another way for me to kind of say why in the world did RSL decide to let go of Rusnak, and how we'll definitely talk about how that turns out to be kind of a head scratching move, consider of the year that he has alongside with Damir Krylak. And then, of course, the last thing that went right, and actually, before I'll talk about the last thing that went right, which is pretty obvious, because, I mean, a lot of RSL fans are very happy the fact that they finally have an owner after going a year and a half without an owner, and they're still kind of been in that limbo situation and trying to move on from that clouded situation that they had to deal with Dele Hansen resigning as the owner of this team. But, you know, the other thing that I didn't put that went right for this team, and I clearly should have put, is the resiliency. I mean, I talked about last episode about, well, just 2 episodes ago, about Nashville and how they had shown some resiliency to come back in games. Well, this RSL team basically they took it to the next level. Like, this team literally leads the league in terms of the most goals scored in the final 15 minutes, and in some way they are a team that they when that final 15 minutes comes, you know that this team, of course, is going to potentially score a goal to win the game. And it's also fitting the fact that, you know, their anthem is the "if you believe it" anthem, and, you know, it seems like this RSL team definitely believe throughout this playoffs or throughout this regular season, and especially into the playoffs too. So yeah, the resiliency of this team was definitely a big character of why eventually they not only just sneak into the playoffs, but also actually were able to make a good run heading into the playoffs. And then, of course, I think the other thing that you could also say that went right for this game is that they also made some big history of becoming the only MLS team to register 0 shot for the entire 120 minute of the game, and still were able to win on a PK shot. Like, that's something that, you know, I know that, of course, happened just last season in that game between DC versus NYCFC, where somehow DC was able to register a 0-0 draw against NYCFC despite failed to register 0 shots throughout the entire game. But I think this is even more impressive with what RSL did. Consider, you know, the fact that they not only registered 0 shot throughout 90 minutes, but to do it for 120 minutes against a team that was everybody kind of penciled them as an MLS Cup contender, and a team that is just absolutely unstoppable when they play at home in the playoffs. I mean, that is the ultimate David versus Goliath matchup, and one of the rare times that David actually prevailed. And it's also kind of fitting the fact that their goalkeeper is called David, because he definitely played a big part, albeit in a very villain way, in that game against the Seattle Sounders. But yeah, besides what went right for them, I mean, there was a lot of things that went right for this RSL team, and really not a lot that kind of went wrong with this team. I mean, the only thing you could say that went wrong is that they were a very mediocre and inconsistent team throughout the season, but it was kind of the case under Mastroianni, especially with the way that Pablo Mastroianni. I get that he was trying to make this team a very entertaining team, but then also there is the issue with the way that this team clearly does not have the defense and have the back line to run that high press system that Mastroianni tends to love his RSL team to do so, and it's no wonder why when you see some of these RSL games, they can either get completely blown apart or the fact that they're involved in these high scoring affairs. And also it kind of explains why they gave up a lot of goals this season. Like when you play that kind of open brand of soccer, yeah, you're going to give up a lot of goals and you're also going to score a lot of goals, which could be very entertaining if you're a neutral. I mean, another thing that was also kind of surprising about this RSL team, and this is something that you rarely see in a MLS team this season, is that they kind of evolved from being one of the most boring teams to watch in the league to being the most exciting team to watch. And that all changed, really when Pablo Mastroianni stepped in, because the second thing that went wrong for this team is talk about the uninspiring soccer that they play under Freddy Juarez. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody that unless you're an RSL fan or you're basically a team supporting a team that is facing RSL, nobody want to watch an RSL game as a neutral. I mean, they play some really boring soccer, and just even at times, even RSL fans kind of got frustrated with such an uninspiring soccer that they play under Freddy Juarez. But again, this is another example of me trying to maybe be a little bit picky, because again, there wasn't really a lot I think that went wrong with this RSL team this season. And then of course, the Cinderella run did die against Portland in this run. And again, all Cinderella run eventually had to come to an end, and not a lot of Cinderella run usually has a happy ending. And this was, of course, once again the case for this Real Salt Lake team. So moving forward for RSL heading into next season, well, after a Cinderella run, heading into next year, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some more expectation. And, this could also be tricky where, when you come off of a year where you basically were able to go deep into the playoffs and you're completely unexpected, it's very easy to have to start putting some unexpected expectation. And I'm really hoping RSL fans are not going to be kind of that, and maybe in some way fell victim to what happened with Minnesota last season, where, I know when the Loons, well, not last season, but also prior to last season in 2020, where the Loons unexpectedly made it all the way to the Western Conference Final, and then there was those unexpected expectation of the fact that, they should be an MLS Cup contender. Though I will say it wasn't really unrealistic when you're basically signing a lot of big name players throughout the off season, and we'll see whether or not if RSL is going to do that, and if they are going to do it, the number one priority that they're going to have to sign a big name player this season in a position is the position that Rusnak basically occupied. Like, again, it's still kind of a head scratching move why they decided to not bring back Rusnak. I mean, he's still in his prime of his career, and I know he was definitely demanding a lot from this RSL team, but you would think that, with the new owner coming in and them pumping some money into this team, they would think about making sure Rusnak, of course, reach a contract extension. But, they decided to let him walk to the Seattle Sounders, which I think the Sounders, even though they signed him to a DP contract, I still think that is definitely going to be a steal, and something that I'm pretty sure RSL will maybe regret down the line if they are not able to find a good replacement for Albert Rusnak. Will the new ownership be more ambitious with spending money while continue investing into the academy? So, this RSL team throughout the year, and especially throughout the last ownership group, they're not a very, very, very ambitious team in terms of spending money, and rightfully so. They play in the smallest market in the league, and when you play in a small market like RSL, it's tough to try to compete with some of those big boys in the big city. But that being said, this new ownership have promised the fact that they are going to maybe be a little bit more ambitious, but they also are going to continue to invest in the academy. And, the RSL Academy, I think, there's been so many times we talk about academies in MLS, and the first couple of teams that might ring up a bell are like the FC Dallas Academy, the Philadelphia Union Academy, and the New York Red Bulls Academy. But people haven't given enough credit of how good RSL Academy is, and that they also do produce some really good talent from their academy, and especially from their USL Championship team that is Rion Knox. And I won't be surprised we're going to see some more decent player that come out of that academy and turns out to be a decent player here in MLS. And then finally, the last thing for this RSL team moving forward is Pablo Mastroeni the right head coach to lead them to the playoffs again? And this is going to be a huge question because, you know, I mean, I have doubts about Mastroeni and whether or not if he can do again, and I'm pretty sure RSL fans probably have the same case, especially with the way how the latter part of the season, and that ever since when Mastroeni's replaced Juarez on an interim basis, he wasn't really doing as well as what Freddy Juarez did to this team. I mean, it was almost feel like this team was still kind of in that inconsistent form where they're just kind of still stuck in being kind of like a team that is on either the outside looking in or just about to get above the red line, and kind of like we're that bubble team. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if getting back Mastroeni's, and I know obviously that playoff run really feel the reason why RSL decided to bring him back. But for a head coach like him, where, you know, his tactics was just kind of all over the place with the way that sometimes he tends to be making a tactics of going all out attack and then just getting absolutely burned in some of those games because they don't have the back line to do so, or playing very conservatively in a way where they just simply parking the bus against the opposition, and it didn't quite work out. You know, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if he, of course, can do well in that. You know, Mastroeni's, before he comes to RSL, he hasn't really had a good history in terms of coaching in MLS. So we'll see whether or not if that, of course, could change, and that, you know, whether or not if what we saw with that Cinderella run with RSL was not just a fluke, and that maybe them choosing Mastroeni is the right option in the future. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And if you're an RSL fan, what do you think went right, went wrong? And most importantly, moving forward, how is next season going to look after an incredible run that they had in the playoffs? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.